If you knew me before, you wouldn't even look my way. If I had the nerve to speak, you wouldn't hear what I say. Time has come and gone so fast, we're not who we used to be.
And welcome back to Sullivan's Unheard Voices. I'm here with Olga. Olga, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you here.
So as I come up here and I pull into this place and I see the animals and the dogs and everything, it's like a scene out of a novel.
Aw.
You know, it's peaceful. And I appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation today, because I don't think a lot of people understand what an animal sanctuary is and what it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted just to have a frank conversation about the wonderful work you do here and why it's so important.
Thank you.
But I think I want to start sort of like with the origin story. So how did you end up here at Kismet to begin with?
Well, first, let's say Kismet is the name of my horse as I was a young adult. And so I decided to name this farm in his honor, Kismet Farms. And I've always had animals. But you know how it is when you love animals, you start accumulating one and then the next and then the next. And then I started thinking, well, you know, if I had more resources and if this was a nonprofit, I would be able to take in more animals. And in 2022, I did a visioning class. And I asked for three things. One was to have more women friends, to have an animal sanctuary, and to find the new love of my life. So 2 out of 3 happens. So I, within 2 months, I started getting calls from people saying, you know, there's a sanctuary that is closing down, and do you want some of the materials? And so I was able to get fencing and gates and tubs and all kinds of things. As soon as that was in place, the animals started coming, and I started the rescue. And it's been so dear to my heart, you know, because I specialize in elderly, neglected, abandoned, or abused animals, or animals whose owners have had a life-changing situation and they can't keep their beloved dogs or their horses or their cows or goats. And so we take them.
See, and I love that idea of it too, because like if you think about it in the traditional sense, an animal that has been abused and neglected in its own life, I think the worst thing, karmically speaking, that you can do is terminate that animal's life.
Mm-hmm.
Why? And so I appreciate that you take abandoned and animals that have been mistreated and give them a second chance at a life of just peace.
Mm-hmm.
Like, thank you for one, and for two, like, was this something that was always sort of like in your blood? Like, have you always had a calling for animals?
Yes, I grew up with a dad who loved animals. And sometimes he would come home in the middle of the night with an abandoned cub or a javelina or something. I grew up in Central America. And my mom would just freak out initially, and then she would end up taking care of them. And then he would take dogs that were abandoned and that had mange, and he would make these sulfur concoctions and, you know, put them all over them. And the dog would be just beautiful. And it just always, we grew up with that, you know. And so it was in my blood, definitely, you know. And I have a son who it has kind of taken after me. So he rescues dogs, and occasionally he shows up with something like a rooster that somebody was getting ready to kill, you know. And so I'm very, very grateful to be able to do this. And, you know, it's a hard road for sanctuaries these days. Donations are low. Grants also are kind of iffy. And so people are not wanting to take more animals, And but I'll give you a quick example. 4 days ago, a friend of mine sent me a post of a woman who was asking, "Can somebody save my potbelly pigs? They've been threatened, to be shot." So, so I have 4 here that are up for adoption, but I thought, these are safe. I don't have to hurry. Someone will adopt them, but this woman they're in peril. So I started, all afternoon in between patients at my work, started calling and texting different people until one of them said, "Let's get him out of there." And so we've saved those 3 potbelly pigs. And, it really didn't cost very much. So those are the type of things that are so rewarding to be in sanctuary. But sanctuary comes from people who want to help an animal, who see that it's going to be killed or abandoned, or and from there comes the let's make room.
Yeah.
Like my barns are like, there's holes that I've made to make another corral, and volunteers that are wonderful. I have a cow shelter that was built in a week by volunteers, and a woman donated all the wood. It was just incredible how it happened. And other times it doesn't. Other times you go, "Oh God, how am I going to get the money for this?" But you do it one step at a time.
And I appreciate that aspect too, because I think some people forget that animals are a part of the community,
Mm-hmm.
and we can't abandon them either.
Right.
Like, we're all in this together. We're all on the same planet. And I know I'm going to say that for the closing folks, but at the same time, like, it holds true. So, like, when you first started, between like then and now, how has your sanctuary grown?
Well, I started with one potbelly pig, and then the animals that I already had. I had geese and chickens, and it has grown now to approximately 40 four-legged ones, and 26 geese and chickens that they're being rescued. I rescued some from one of those chicken mills that was closing. Other people that just, couldn't keep them. Goats where 3 of the goats got killed by a cougar. And so the family was like, "How can we save this one?" So the emergency, we bring them here. So it just grew. The donkey, I always wanted a donkey. And
He's so cute.
I know. And I got a call that there was this donkey that needed to be moved. And so a friend, we go there with this huge trailer, and
Perfect.
I know.
Perfect.
And these guys here are babies where the mom hid with eggs and hatched them. So, so then they become part of everything here. And but the donkey, I went to get him, and the situation was, they were in mud up to their knees, and he was there with 3 goats, and they asked us if we could take all of them. Well, immediately we put it, and we realized it was a mini. We didn't even know it was a mini. And we put the goats in the trailer, but then the donkey was just, And I don't know if you believe in this kind of thing, but the guys told me, "We're not going to catch this donkey." So I kind of went to the side and called my animal communicator, and I said, "Can you help?" And the donkey says, "Well, they took my friends." And she says, "Oh God, did you guys take his friends?" I said, "They're in the trailer." And she says, Coco, the goats are in the trailer. I want you to walk over to those guys, put your head down and stand still. She did it. And the guys are going, okay, what's going on here? What's going on? And I said, just put the halter on and get her in the trailer. And that was one of those where you go, oh my God, this really works, And so Coco is very happy here. She has a horde of goats, and she's the queen of them. A couple of old alpacas that were, the people were leaving and they didn't have a place for them, and they're here, so.
And it's interesting because like I think people kind of forget that it could be at any moment life circumstances change. And one of the most difficult things is to find temporary housing for animals.
Yeah.
And so like just the idea. So like take me through like a typical, so like does somebody like call you at 2:00 in the afternoon or 3:00 in the morning and just kind of say, hey, run over here. We have something for you to look at. Is that kind of how it works?
How it works usually is like, I'm desperate. I need to find a home for these animals. I thought I had a home, but they backed out. Can you help? Oh my God, I'm full, but let's see what we can do. And then you end up taking them. There was a situation, for example, with 2 pigs, 10-year-olds, and they were family pets. But then there was a divorce, and the judge said that the husband had to take the pigs. Well, the wife stopped feeding them. And the husband said, we're going to euthanize. And one of the veterinarians was the one who called and said, can you save these pigs? And I said, yes. And they brought them here. It took a while for them to gain weight, especially the little male, because they weren't being fed. And it was like, what? But they're happy now. They have a soft place to land, and, and these geese have the run of the place.
I love it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's the kind of situation that happens. Other times there's people who call and say, we're moving. We just have to give the animals up. We don't give as much priority those initially until we see that there is a risk. First we tell them, we'll try to find somebody that will take them, and as a last resort, call us. Because there are some that are in kill shelters where the need is, greater. So that's how we prioritize, and I'm on the radar now because I get a lot of calls. So, and with the sign that I have up front was donated to us. And so now people are seeing that. And then August 1st, we're having a fundraiser. There'll be music and food and games, and children can come and meet all the animals. And so we get known a little more. And maybe because we are a nonprofit, then any tax deductions, are available.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And then in terms of like the aspect of, because you bring up a good point. One of the things that I've been binge watching lately is the show Alone.
Mm.
And when you have been malnourished, for the point of exhaustion, it's not like you can just give that animal a candy bar and they're going to be back to normal. There's a lot of work involved in getting a neglected animal to be back and healthy and thriving again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like how do you handle sort of getting an idea of what every animal might need when it comes through your door?
Well, the first thing is we call the vet, and there's specialized vets, for example, for potbelly pigs. Not everybody wants to see them. So we have like 3 or 4 vets. So they come in, they assess the animal, see if he needs any vitamins, B12, anything like that, deworm him, and we quarantine just to make sure. And then after that, because of my career, then I do a lot of herbs and potions for them. And like this morning, I make a roll. All the bowls for the potbelly pigs are there, and then I'm throwing vitamins, and then after that, I'm throwing a coat improver, and then beet pulp, and maybe an egg, and depending on who needs it. And so they respond really well, and some of them come in pretty bad shape, mange, and where they have to be separated, and but they recover. They're resilient.
At the same time, though, it's got to be kind of heartbreaking when you walk into those situations, right? Because like they don't have the ability to self-protect in a lot of cases.
Yeah. One of the worst cases was when we were called and said that there were several animals that had been moved from a home, but that there was a sheep left. They couldn't get her, and the owner had given permission to go in there. What we didn't know, it was that the dogs had passed away. There was a lot of neglect, and this particular ewe survived. And because we had permission, we went in there. It took several of us. I had my farrier with me, and lassos, and we got her here, and she's thriving. She's gained all her weight back. The first thing we did was call the shearer. He comes in, sheared her, probably 10 pounds of wool. Then he gives her all her shots, her hoofs, and yeah. So.
And I love everything about that, right? Because one of the things I noticed is like as you pull in and when you let the goats out and the donkey out, you can tell when animals are happy in the way they interact with each other. And it's nice to see a place like this where the animals have the ability to just be themselves and just take whatever life gives them. Like right now we have a donkey in the background rolling on his back in the dirt,
That's
just playing and frolicking around. Like,
yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's absolutely amazing. So I guess the next question is about sort of like the animal care itself, right? Because if somebody wants to go out and get one goat, for example, I always say no. If you don't get two goats, like a lot of these animals are pack animals,
Right.
and having an animal by itself is kind of neglectful in a way, right?
Yeah. Yeah, goats definitely like to be in packs. Getting one goat and having the goat just live with you is not that good. And like now I have 2 donkeys. One is an elderly boy, and he came from Klamath Falls large animal shelter, and that's why they were looking for a place that had another donkey, because they're pack animals.
Yeah.
The alpacas is 2 of them, and the goats, of course, there's like 10 of them.
And what kind of goats are they?
For some reason, most of my goats are either Nigerian dwarfs or pygmies. Yeah. And I've kind of kept it that way. So if somebody wants to find a home for a Nubian, or some big goat, I find a home for them. But I don't bring them here, just because these guys are little,
And Nubians require a much higher, stronger fence because
Right.
they can jump.
Yeah.
Oh, can they jump?
Oh my God, yeah.
Like I remember, so we grew up with goats, and I remember playing King of the Mountain with our goats. We had this stump, and you would get up there, and you would just put one hand on the top of your head, and he would rear up on his hind legs, and he would headbutt your hand. But he was always
Oh my
so
God,
gentle.
Yeah.
And goats are just amazing creatures.
They are, and they're intelligent. They will get away with as much as they can, and so they are they're tricksters, but I love them. They're just great, and their names they all came with their names. And there were some tears with some people who had to give up their goats.
Yeah.
And there was other times when, like, there was 2 goats that we rescued, and we had to carry them out,
Oh.
because the place was flooded, and they lived in a 5x5 shed with no windows, just a door. And the person would just throw corn in there. And one of them had pneumonia. So the vet was here, huge bills, but we were able to save them, One didn't live as long, just a couple of years. And it was really hard because, that's the other hard part of this, it's when you lose one, did he die of old age? What happened? Did I do everything right? And like this guy here, Gussie, one day he couldn't walk. And so after 3 veterinarians trying to figure out what was going on, antibiotics, wormers, everything, he started walking on his elbows. And then I had a vet who's a chiropractor come and adjust them. And pretty soon he started walking, so he's back to his normal, ornery self.
And full disclosure, folks, I met Gus earlier, and he is a joy.
Yeah.
He's such a sweetheart.
Yeah, he is.
I don't understand how people can abuse animals, such as it's just it's so sad.
Yeah.
At the same time, though, such rewarding. But you said something interesting. So, when a veterinarian is involved, do they at least give you a discount?
Well, no, but
Bummer.
I just, there's one veterinarian in Newburgh, Veterinary Services of Oregon, that actually gave me a really good discount because he just wanted me to send him my forms that I'm a 501c3 and said, I'm gonna discount the services. It was quite a savings, so I was very appreciative. He says that they're trying it out this year and see how it goes. So, but not the rest.
And I guess the reason I bring it up is because that's why conversations like this are needed, because the donations are very much needed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things where not enough resources sort of go towards places like this.
Right.
And so you rely pretty much on private donations and private funding, right?
Yeah. I as a 501c3, every donation is a tax deductible. And some people are very generous, but times are hard.
Yeah.
And so right now I have this auction going on online on Facebook, Ori's Rooting for Rescues auction, and people can go in there and choose a piece of art or something and then bid, and then that's a donation to us, and the art was donated by somebody else. So I do things like that to help bring in money and reach out to people that I know, maybe have done this kind of thing in the past,
Yeah.
And I received my first grant at the end of last year by a place in Arizona, Idealistic Cause Foundation. And I went to the mailbox and I didn't know that it was coming. And I saw this envelope and it was wet, and I thought, and I opened it up and I went, oh my God. I was so excited that I was getting a donation from a foundation, So, so those, and I named this place Kismet, Kismet, Kismet Farms Animal Sanctuary, in honor of my horse, and Kismet means serendipity. And so then the next line says a place for second chances. And that's what we are. Yeah.
And then take me through like the process of like when an animal gets here. Do you have to like kind of keep them separate to sort of things? Is there like a quarantine period?
Yeah, especially for a goat, if it was an emergency situation where they have to bring him here and they can't quarantine him at their place, then we have the vet come over and do something called a bioscreen to make sure they don't have something called CAE, which is a arthritic situation with the goats. They get dewormed, they get all their shots, and then they're quarantined until we receive the results from the test. And luckily, all of them have been negative. And but that way, we also take care of all the worming and everything. And we usually have like a volunteer come over and read to them or something, because they can't socialize with anybody else.
Okay, so you broke my autistic brain for a moment there. I have so many thoughts on that subject. Because, okay, so you have somebody come over and read to the goats. So here's where my mind just went, right? I have so many people who are autistic like me, who are looking for a way to engage in the community in creative ways, who struggle engaging with other humans.
Mm-hmm. This would be perfect.
That's what I was thinking. Like, I want to have a conversation with you after air because, like, if you're looking for volunteers who are willing to, like, read to goats and not do the goat cleaning,
exactly,
I could probably find you a bunch of volunteers. I kid you not. Like, that is the coolest opportunity ever because not only are you sort of reading to the goats, so correct me if I'm wrong, but when somebody is reading to the goats actually all kind of circle around, don't they?
Well, one example is the one that was brought here because her buddies had been killed by a cougar. And so we had somebody come over and read to her because she wasn't eating. And so the woman started reading to her Charlotte's Web. And the goat just kind of stood there looking into the corner, and then it turned around and started eating. And it was like, that peaceful, interaction was all it needed. And then it ate after that. So that's when we decided maybe, some of these guys really need, some interaction with somebody, reading, brushing them, loving them. The most recent donkey that came from Klamath Falls, they told us if you can find somebody that can come and brush him, just to be there with him because he's going to be a little lonely. So things like that, are really important. And for me, when I walk into the corrals to feed, I'm talking to everybody. Good morning. How's everybody doing? What you got going there? And I just talk to them.
And I want to be clear, folks. It's not like we believe that they are actually listening and hearing what we're saying.
Exactly.
They are picking up on our energy.
Yeah.
Animals are so in tune to humans' energy. So when you're volunteering to read to a goat, it's not like the goat is going to understand the words you're saying. They're going to feed off your energy and it's going to calm them down.
Exactly.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. Yes, that's exactly. I couldn't have put it better.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And then you mentioned mountain lions too. So I am curious, right? So a sanctuary sort of like this size with this many animals, what do you do to protect these animals?
You met them, the Anatolians.
And that's what I want people to know, right?
Yeah.
Because what is it about Anatolian shepherds that makes them the best dog to guard a place
They patrol. At night you can hear, especially Elsa, she patrols the property. And you kind of know when she's just barking to bark or when she sees something. And, they're definitely incredible for that. Yeah.
Smart and big.
Yeah, they're
but then
big.
Also, you don't have to worry about them around your family.
No.
They will protect you and the herd,
right,
and will never hurt you or the herd.
Yeah. To add to that, everybody goes in at night. So I don't leave, even the alpacas like to come in at night. But they go out because alpacas also will protect. But they're elderly. But they do protect. If they hear something, you can tell the way they hunch down and they start running. It's funny, but they're onto something, And so they protect. But I would say that the Anatolians are the big one, for us. Yeah.
And and then in terms of like at night and you're putting them in the pen, do they all tend to gravitate back? Or they kind of know what happens at this point and they're like, okay, yeah, go? Or do you ever have to like spend some time wrangling a few people?
No, like the other day, I've been trying to get more followers, and things like that, and better reels. And my reels are like 500, Well, the other day, the geese were out, and I just said, "Come here, geese," and they all start running, And so, I'm going to film this, and so I'm going, "Come here, geese, come here," because it's the time of night. I got like 6,000 views, So they all come, and when I say, "Come on, goats," Coco rounds them up.
Coco is one of the goats?
No, the donkey.
The donkey rounds up the goats? Oh, that is so epic.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I love everything about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because sometimes she gets distracted and she's doing something, and the goats came in, and all of a sudden you can see that where are my goats? And she starts running and just checking everybody. So they all have found a purpose in a job, a duty, that is important to them. And the alpacas, when they first came, even though they're elderly, they used to chase me, and it was a little scary. And then in last year, my nephew came to town with his son, and his son went up to one of the alpacas and started petting it. And I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
And after that, I go and I just pat him. And, it's just like it broke that cycle for them. So, and that nephew learned every animal's name while he was here.
And then also on top of that, though, I would imagine that you never know how long it's going to take a particular animal that's rescued to flip that corner,
Right.
And to just know that they're feeling safe.
Yeah. I have been fortunate that it's not that long of a time. An example is the cows. I have a steer and a mini cow, a zebu. Well, the zebu lived here with an Oreo cow, Rita. And when Rita passed away because she was elderly, Macy, the little cow, was just devastated. So somebody called me crying, saying that they had the steer and they had changed their minds about taking it to slaughter. And so I said, well, Macy needs so this is perfect. So in comes this huge trailer, and this thing comes out of the trailer. And I go, oh my God, what have I done? And he walks in, 2,000 pounds, and
whoa,
Macy looks at him and takes off running, and he's bucking and everything. And I told the people, I don't think this is going to work. And the woman started crying. And then I said, I'm going to give him a week, but if not, you have to come and get him. They're inseparable. It took about 2 weeks, for them to feel safe with each other, and for Bucky, that's his name, to know that he was safe here. And, so he has gotten out a couple of times, and he's 3,000 pounds now. But people love him when they come here for open house. So.
And so what do you do in terms of the food for all of these animals?
Yeah, it's very expensive. I just finished buying, that barn is full of hay, that tons. of local grass hay that the goats and the cows eat, and the alpacas. And so that's a once a year situation. So I have to try to figure out, make sure that I can afford it, make sure that I can get it for the whole year, because after that it's extremely expensive. And then someone else donated a ton of something called orchard grass, which is very expensive. And so I give a little bit of that to each one. The others is like a every 2-week situation. We go to Gerber Farms, is one of the feed stores, and buy 15 bags of pig food, 3 bags of goose food, and pellets for the goats, grain for the goats. It's expensive, I look at, and they're kind enough that they let me pay at the end of the month. And sometimes I look at the bill and I go, "Whoa, that's a lot of that's a lot of food." But I have to feed them. So, and I'm kind of shy, might not seem the way I'm talking, but asking is hard for me.
Yeah.
It's I have a couple of people that I'll go to them and I say, "Hey, how's your tax and everything going? How about $1,000?" And he'll, "Oh, yeah, you need that? Yeah, I'll give it to you." That's very rare for me to do that, But you get kind of a thick skin when you're saving this amount of animals. And so my goal is to have more followers that know us, so that, little donations can come in. And so it's constantly posting things on social media. My son helps me with that too. So it's an ongoing thing.
And I want people to sort of understand and hear that, right? That this is not something that happens in a vacuum. This is a lot of moving pieces to keep a place like this going. And when you're thinking about places to donate or things to contribute charity wise, a place like this isn't usually on people in the city's radar because they don't see or observe animals.
Right.
And so I kind of wanted to give voice to a place like this and say, hey, all of you city folk, like places like this need your donations too.
Thank you.
Yeah. So was this sort of like the idea of being in this location originally? Like, how did you end up in the Malala area?
Well, I'm from New Orleans and moved to California to go to school. And then I decided that Oregon was, the place to be, and found this place 20-some years ago. And had a couple of horses and a couple of chickens, and started my little practice in Estacada, which is just like 5 minutes from here. And it just lent itself to what I wanted to do. But it's scary, because you see, there are some sanctuaries that are doing really well, but they have been at it for a long time. But there are many who are struggling right now, and some are closing. And I have a board of directors, so I have to do everything. Everything is done properly. You file. I have a license with Oregon Department of Agriculture. They came here and checked me out and everything, and then sent me my license. And I sweated for a week before they came, wondering if they're going to find something wrong. But they were happy with what I had, and then twice a year I have to send them records, of who I have. Has anybody passed away? That type of thing. I haven't gotten anybody else. If I were to bring somebody from out of state, there's a lot of regulations for that also.
So, I mean, if you were to like rescue an animal from somewhere else, there's a
Right.
lot more paperwork
Yeah.
involved just to be able to take them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm curious. So, when they were here and doing their inspection, what kind of things were they looking for?
They wanted to make sure that all my corrals were clean, that they had access to outside, that they were watered. They wanted to look at the vet checks, to make sure that they were getting wormed and whatever else was needed. And fencing, to make sure that that was done properly. They're very thorough. Some people don't like ODA, but I feel that they're there for the protection of the animals, and it was raining the day that that the woman came. She took her boots off, put new boots on, sprayed them so that she wouldn't give any germs or whatever to my farm from another farm. That's huge. And then I said to her, I wanted to take you to my house and sit by a warm fire, Oh, she says, this is great because we're in the barns. She says, I've gone to some places where I have to stand in the rain while, we do the interview. And it's because people are nervous, about what they're going to do. But I think they're just they're looking after the well-being of the animal. And I appreciate that,
And that's one thing I'm curious about too, and sort of like part of the caring for the animals. Like, how important is it that you cycle through and make sure that there's clean, fresh water?
Oh, twice a day. Yeah, it's really important. And we get on each other's case if there is water that doesn't look that great. And my son is actually in charge of all the waters. And he does little swimming pools for the pigs and everything too. So it's really important. We feed twice a day for everybody. And so I have my ex-husband helps me. He comes 3 days a week and feeds in the morning. My son feeds, 3 nights during the week, and I take over the days that I don't work. So it's a team effort, and I have volunteers who come, not as much as I would like, but I'm getting there, who come and then do a thorough corral cleaning twice a month, and I have this couple that comes here and they work so hard and they're so dedicated that I'm very grateful to have them. So it's not just the people running the place, but it's the volunteers that you can have, like for the event that I'm having August 1st, I have to have a lot of volunteers, people who will be given the tours, so that you can go and meet the animals and pet them, whatever, but, with a volunteer there all the time. Other volunteers will be selling art and the music. I have Ray Gordon is going to be here with donation. She donates her time,
She's an amazing musician and an amazing human.
Yeah.
Ray, you still need to get back to me about being on the podcast. That's a different story.
Okay. Well, there you go, Ray. Yeah, she's great. She's going to play from 12 to 2:30, and then after that I have some kind of folksy band coming. So we always have music, and they donate their time. And then we have somebody who comes and sets up and does food, so it's a whole event. Do we make money? Not a lot, but it's one more opportunity for us to get known.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And I have also found it that it is the people who are kind at heart and doing this for the love of it that have the most difficult asking people for money. I hate doing that as well. Like I have quit jobs when they said that, no, you need to be working the phones asking for money.
Oh,
Like I
God.
can't do that. Like that's it. Like I don't think people realize just how hard that is sometimes. But at the same time, like you need that external help.
Right.
So you're sort of cut in the loop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, well, one of my board members, she said, what can I do for you? Well, and just tell me. And I said, well, I need t-shirts done. Okay, I'm taking over the t-shirts. And if I hadn't asked her,
Yeah.
but
And who do we have behind us?
this is Daisy. And Daisy has an interesting story because I was in Milwaukee to meet a friend and my GPS gave me the wrong. So I ended up on this street, on the wrong side of the tracks. And I was getting ready to call my friend, and I see across the street there's a guy with chickens and a goat. So I went and I said, oh my God, I said, this is just great to see somebody doing this in town. Well, he says, I'm having to get rid of the goat. And I said, well, I have an animal sanctuary. That guy threw his tools and was across the street so fast and got all my information. He really vetted me. Took her to the vet for all her shots. She got quarantined to see the bioscreen, and then she brought her here. And she's a very smart little girl because she had that homey sort of upbringing, and her name is Daisy.
That's so awesome.
So that was serendipity,
And sometimes those are the best opportunities, right? There have been so many points in my life where if I had turned right instead of left,
exactly,
who knows what it would be. And then something else that sort of blew my mind as we started, or just before we started this podcast interview, is that this place is so awesome for animals that you have a Canadian goose that won't leave.
I know.
How long has he been here?
Well, he was here. Somebody brought him. We thought he was a duck. And so I tried to give him to one of my geese who had babies, and she didn't want him. So I had this paraplegic old duck. And so I gave her this guy and a little gosling that had been abandoned, and she just took him in. And then I called the wildlife, and they said, well, as the first migration happens, he'll just leave. Well, he sees them go by, and he'll go and do his thing, and then comes back. It's like he's bonded with these guys. And of course, my geese look at him fly away, and they go, oh my God, he can fly. Because these guys are so fat, they can't. So... And they'll fly just high enough to crash into something. But this guy, and I think it's a female, she just takes off and then comes back at her own will. Yeah.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
And then the other question I have is in terms of like the donkey. I'm kind of curious, like, do they have the same sort of hoof maintenance that a horse needs?
It's a little more intense. So I have a farrier. He comes every 8 weeks, and he trims her, and so it's a little bit more important. The other thing with donkeys also is that you need what is called a dry lot, so they can't be in heavy pasture. She couldn't be on that side because the grass would be too much sugar, and so here, it's very, very short, and I've allowed it to become short because then they can be out and not get colic or anything. And so it's a little different maintenance for them. Whereas the cows, they can eat as much as they want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you pretty much never have to worry about the cow's hoofs, right?
No, actually, I have had a guy come from Salem, and it's a little barbaric because he puts them into a chute and then turns them upside down. So now they're on their back, and then he trims their hoofs and The little one has had it done. I don't know if Bucky would fit in any shoes.
That's fair. So what kinds of, and here's the donkey.
Hi,
Aw,
Coco.
Coco, you're so adorable. Just in case folks can't see, there's
Hi,
your
Coco.
face. Hi. Well, so what kinds of volunteers are you looking for right now?
Well, I would love to have volunteers who could come here and even if it was once a week and just wash all the bowls and everything for everybody. Maybe do waters. Somebody that maybe could come even once a week to feed, to give somebody else relief. And then corral cleaning. That's a big one. You know, the pigs need their corrals cleaned, the donkey, we do that almost. The donkey is every day, you know, so she has mats that somebody donated. And so they're easier, you know, to scoop up and
Yeah.
So we just need volunteers.
Volunteers, and then of course financial donations,
Yeah.
folks.
Yeah.
So and we've been at this for almost an hour now. So where can people go to get more information about Kismet?
Okay, so I have a page, Kismet Farms Animal Sanctuary, on Facebook. Have Ori's Legacy, Rooting for Rescues, Kismet Farms Auction. And then I have a website, kismetfarmsanimalsanctuary.org. And in there you can find more information about what we do, see some of the animals. And then there's Pet Pal, Venmo, and something else. Yeah.
And then the last kind of question, I guess, would be like around like, so what advice would you give to a family that has an animal and they now know that within a couple months' time they may have to relocate that animal? Where's the best place for people to go to start finding information or seeking help?
Well, the first thing is, right now there's an overabundance of potbelly pigs being rehomed, specifically because somebody got them. They didn't realize they were going to get so big, or that they were going to not be as compliant inside a home because they had them in their home. And so the first thing to do is, of course, see if there's a way of working things out. Could the pig be outside in the yard and have still access to the home? So the first thing is see if you can keep the animal. If that becomes a no, then it would be a rescue place, a sanctuary, because putting a post on Facebook or Craigslist saying potbelly pig free, the chances are that that little animal could get eaten.
Yeah.
And I'm not being is real. And so first place is a sanctuary. You know, any kind of animal sanctuary, any kind of animal rescue. There's snouts of, I'm not sure, but it's a place east. They don't take the animals, but they find homes. You know, so there. And so now I'm talking about pigs, but it's the same thing with any kind of animal, goats, alpacas, anything like that. Don't be so eager to give them away without really investigating what's going to happen to them, and don't do it for free unless it's to a rescue. You know, and I have people who I take their animal and then they generously give me a donation that I'm not asking for. You know.
Yeah.
Just because I'm taking their pet. You know, so. Yeah.
And I also want to stress, folks, don't just show up here with your animal either. please. Like, reach out first and get an idea of what steps to do next. Like, I'm assuming you will always welcome a text or a phone call or an email.
Yeah.
But please, I beg you, don't show up with an animal. Like, I know your intention is the best, but you need to make sure that there's a spot open. There's a lot more moving pieces to an organization like this than people realize.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of moving pieces, a lot of things to look at. Where is it going to go? What are the steps that we need to take? Transport. You know, some people say, yeah, I need to, but I don't have transport. Well, Klamath Falls Animal Shelter, they transported the donkey here. They were so happy to have this place that they did a 5-hour transport. And I helped them also place one of their pigs with somebody in Silverton. They transported that pig all the way from Klamath. That's a dedicated shelter, you know? Yeah.
But that's what it takes sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, Olga, thank you so much. I'll end the podcast the way I always end the podcast, folks. Be kind. We all live on the same planet. We breathe the same air, and this world would be just a little bit better if we treated everybody with a little kindness and respect. And check out Kismet Animal Sanctuary.
Thank you, Shawn.
Thank you.
This was lovely.